Hey, my name is Ryan Carter. I'm 25 and I work as an interior architect for a commercial design firm in Chicago. My job is to turn cold, empty spaces into places people actually want to stay in. It sounds nice on paper, but most nights I'm hunched over revisions at 2 in the morning, arguing with clients who don't even know what they want until I show them what they don't. I met Claire for the first time while I was still dating her younger sister, Sophie. Sophie and I were together for almost 4 years before we ended things. No cheating, no screaming matches, just two people who gradually realized they fit next to each other, but weren't really heading in the same direction anymore. We broke up quietly, the way adults sometimes do when they've run out of reasons to stay but still care enough not to burn everything down. The only part I never expected was Claire. She's 5 years older than me, a CEO of a branding strategy firm based in New York. Sharp, calm, precise in a way that makes people sit up straighter when she walks into a room. During the years I dated Sophie, Claire kept a polite distance. Never cold, but never close either. She was the kind of woman who made you feel like she already knew 3 moves ahead of whatever conversation you were having. After Sophie and I split, I assumed whatever loose connection I had with Claire would quietly disappear like everything else. 3 months later, she called me. She was renovating a new office and needed someone to review the lighting plans because she suspected the contractor was cutting corners on materials. I looked at the drawings. Then she asked again a few weeks after that. Then, a couple months later, she sent me a photo of a new cafe that had just opened and asked what I thought of the spatial design. That's how we started talking, not often, not on purpose, but steadily. Some people enter your life with noise and fanfare. Claire arrived like the last light left on in a room after everyone else had gone home. Quiet. But once you noticed it, you didn't want to be in the dark anymore. 2 years passed that way, until that Friday night. I walked into an Italian restaurant near the river to meet a client and saw her sitting alone at a table for two. Her back was perfectly straight. Her water glass was empty. The bread on the plate hadn't been touched. And the second I saw her, I knew she had been left there. I stood there for maybe 3 seconds before I walked over and pulled out the chair across from her. Claire looked up, startled for half a second. "Ryan, I'm guessing you could use some company tonight." She was quiet for a moment, then gave a small, tired smile. "If you sit down, you're officially my date for the evening." "Well, then at least tell me what you ordered." I ordered the same thing she did. While we ate, Claire told me the man had been a lawyer she met at a business conference. The first 2 dates had been fine. Tonight, he took a phone call and simply never came back. She told the story like she was presenting a quarterly report. No emotion. But I'd known her long enough to recognize when she was performing the role of "I'm fine." "That guy's an idiot," I said. Claire looked at me. "You don't have to comfort me." "I'm not comforting you," I answered. "I'm just telling the truth." For the first time that night, she reached for a piece of bread. It was such a small thing, but something about it made my chest tighten. We sat there for almost 2 more hours, talking about work, about the city, about restaurants that had closed after the pandemic, about how lonely adults really are, even when they look like they have everything together. When we finally stood outside waiting for our coats, Claire said something that caught me completely off guard. "You're the only person I called tonight." I didn't know how to answer. Out of all the people in her life, colleagues, friends, exes, family, she had chosen to call me. And on the drive home, I finally let myself admit something I'd been avoiding for 2 years. I hadn't seen Claire as just Sophie's older sister in a very long time. I pulled into my parking spot but didn't get out right away. I sat there with the engine off, the city lights reflecting off the windshield, and let the realization settle. Claire had always been careful with me. Polite, professional. Even when we started talking more, she never crossed the line she had drawn for herself. But tonight, something had shifted. The way she looked at me when I sat down. The way her voice softened when she said, I was the only one she called. The way she finally reached for that piece of bread, like she was allowing herself to be a little less guarded. I wasn't sure what any of it meant yet. I only knew that for the first time since Sophie and I ended things, I wasn't thinking about my ex. I was thinking about her sister. And that thought didn't scare me the way it probably should have. I got out of the car and walked up to my apartment, but sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Claire sitting alone at that table, back straight, waiting for someone who wasn't coming back. Only this time, she wasn't alone anymore. Because I had sat down, and I had a feeling I wasn't going to stand up and walk away anytime soon. 2 days later, I texted her. "There's a weekend market near the harbor. Want to go?" She replied after 3 minutes. 11, don't be late. That was Claire, direct, no emojis, no small talk. When I arrived, she was already standing in front of a flower stall, her hair down instead of pulled back the way she usually wore it at work. It made her look younger, softer. I caught myself staring a second too long, and she caught me too. "You're 2 minutes late," she said. "I was looking for parking. That's why grown-ups leave the house earlier." I laughed, and just like that, the tension from Friday night eased into something lighter. We walked for almost 2 hours. Claire bought raw honey from a local beekeeper, a bag of small batch roasted coffee, and a cream-colored knit scarf she ran her fingers over for a long time before deciding. I bought a loaf of sourdough only because she said it smelled like the bread her grandmother used to make in upstate New York. Everything felt too easy, too natural. And that was the dangerous part. We ended up sitting on a bench by the water watching the boats drift in and out of the harbor. The sun was warm for late spring, and for a while neither of us spoke. Then Claire said something that made me turn to look at her. "This isn't the first time a man has left me in the middle of something." I waited. She wasn't looking at me. Her eyes were on the water. "I don't just mean at restaurants," she continued, her voice calm, almost detached. "I mean, they like the idea of me more than the actual person. They like a strong woman until they have to actually be with one. They like an independent woman until they realize she doesn't need them to survive." She said it without bitterness, just facts, like she had already made peace with it a long time ago. "I think they're scared of you," I said. Claire raised an eyebrow, finally glancing at me. "And you?" "I think you're worth the effort." She didn't answer right away. The silence that followed stretched between us, but it wasn't the same kind of silence we'd shared before. This one felt heavier, more charged, like something unspoken had finally stepped into the light. We stayed there a little longer talking about smaller things, the best coffee shops in the city, a documentary she'd watched the night before, the way Chicago changed after the pandemic. But underneath every word, I could feel it. The shift. The line we had both been pretending not to see was starting to blur. The next evening, Sophie called. I almost didn't answer. My thumb hovered over the screen for 3 rings before I finally picked up. We hadn't spoken much since the breakup, just the occasional text on birthdays or when something reminded one of us of the other. The conversation stayed light at first. How was work? How was New York? Then Sophie said something that made my stomach tighten. "Claire's been mentioning you a lot lately." I stayed quiet. "I'm not calling to warn you or anything," she continued, her voice gentle. She seems happier when you're around. I wanted you to know that." After we hung up, I sat on my couch in the dark for a long time. The city hummed outside my window, but inside my apartment it was completely still. I kept replaying Sophie's words, kept thinking about the way Claire had looked at me by the water, kept remembering how natural it had felt to walk beside her for 2 hours without needing to fill every silence. And for the first time, I let myself admit what I had been avoiding for 2 years. I wasn't just attracted to Claire. I was falling for her. And the scariest part wasn't that she was my ex's older sister. The scariest part was that I had no idea if she felt the same way, or if she ever would. I didn't text her that night. I didn't call. I just sat there with the weight of it, wondering how long I could keep pretending this was still just friendship. Because after today, after that silence by the water and Sophie's quiet confirmation, I knew the truth. It hadn't been friendship for a while now. Not for me, and I had a feeling it hadn't been for her either. A few days after the market, Claire texted me late on a Wednesday night. "I have a big presentation tomorrow and the coffee machine in the office is broken. If you bring food, I might actually survive this." I didn't hesitate. I already knew she hadn't eaten. Claire had a habit of forgetting meals when she was in deep work mode, and I'd seen enough of her late-night texts to recognize the signs. I picked up Thai food from her favorite place near the river and drove to her building. She opened the door on the 12th floor, looking more human than I'd ever seen her. Her blazer was draped over the back of her chair, her hair slightly messy, and there were faint shadows under her eyes. The always perfect Claire looked tired, and somehow that made her even more beautiful. "You didn't have to do this," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "I know." I set the food on the conference table and watched as she opened one of the containers and took a slow bite. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The office was quiet except for the low hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic 12 stories below. We ended up working together for nearly 3 hours. I helped her adjust the layout of the slides, debated the order of her data points, and fixed a few numbers that didn't quite add up. She argued with me when she disagreed, and I pushed back when I thought she was being too cautious. It felt natural, like we'd been doing this for years. By the time we finished, it was almost 10 o'clock. Claire leaned back in her chair and looked at me for a long time. "You always make everything easier," she said quietly. I smiled. "I just brought food." "Ryan." She cut me off before I could say anything else. "Don't pretend you don't know what I'm talking about." The air in the room changed. The silence that followed was thick, almost heavy. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Claire set her laptop aside and turned fully toward me. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked uncertain. "I've been trying to call this friendship for almost a year," she said. Her voice was steady, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. "But I don't believe that anymore." I didn't move. I barely breathed. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" I asked. She gave a small, almost sad smile. "Because you're the only thing in my life that actually scares me if I lose it." That hit me harder than I expected. I stood up slowly and walked around the table until I was standing in front of her. She looked up at me, and for once, there was no mask, no composed CEO expression. Just Claire. "Then maybe we should stop pretending," I said. Claire studied my face for a long moment. I could see the war happening behind her eyes, the part of her that had spent years protecting herself versus the part that was tired of being alone. "I don't do things halfway, Ryan," she said finally. "Neither do I." She stood up. We were close now, closer than we'd ever been. I could smell the faint trace of her perfume mixed with the Thai food and the late-night office air. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure she could hear it. For a second, neither of us moved. Then Claire reached out and touched my hand, just a light brush of her fingers against mine. It was the smallest gesture, but it felt like everything. "I'm not going to lie to you," she said softly. "I'm scared. I've spent a long time making sure no one could hurt me again. And you? You make me want to stop being so careful." I turned my hand over and laced my fingers through hers. "I'm scared too," I admitted. "But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." Claire let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped in her chest for months. She stepped closer, and I wrapped my arms around her. She rested her head against my shoulder, and for the first time in 2 years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. We didn't kiss that night. We didn't need to. The confession had already changed everything. We sat on the floor of her office for another hour, eating cold Thai food and talking about things we'd both been too afraid to say out loud. She told me about the years after her divorce, how she'd built walls so high that even she sometimes forgot what was on the other side. I told her about the quiet fear I'd carried since Sophie and I broke up, the fear that I'd never feel that kind of connection with anyone again. And somewhere between the spring rolls and the quiet laughter, I realized something. I wasn't falling for Claire anymore. I had already fallen, and from the way she looked at me when I walked her to her car later that night, I had a feeling she was right there with me. We didn't make any big declarations. We didn't define what we were. But when she drove away, I stood in the parking garage for a long time, watching her taillights disappear, and I knew one thing for certain. Whatever this was between us, it was real, and neither of us was going to run from it anymore. The day before our first official date, Sophie asked to meet me. We sat in a quiet cafe near the river, the same one Claire and I had walked past a few weeks earlier. Sophie looked older than I remembered, or maybe I was just seeing her differently now. She stirred her coffee for a long time before she spoke. "Claire had a marriage that ended badly a long time ago," she said quietly. After that, she built her entire career on never letting anyone see her weak. If you're going to step into her life, Ryan, you need to understand that she'll always have an exit plan ready. She spent years making sure no one can hurt her again. I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at the steam rising from my cup and let her words settle. I'm not trying to scare you, Sophie continued. I just want you to know what you're walking into. She's not cold, she's just careful. Too careful sometimes. After we said goodbye, I walked along the river for almost an hour, thinking. Sophie's warning should have made me hesitate. Instead, it made something click into place. Loving someone who had been hurt before wasn't about trying to fix them or make them stop being afraid. It was about becoming the person they didn't have to be afraid with. The one who stayed even when things got quiet. Even when there was nothing to prove. That evening, I took Claire to a small restaurant she had mentioned only once, months ago in passing. I remembered the name. When we walked in, she stopped just inside the door and looked at me with genuine surprise. You remembered, she said. I remember most things you tell me. We sat by the window overlooking the water. Claire ordered the same dish she always did when she was nervous, grilled salmon with roasted vegetables. I let her talk, about work, about a deal she was closing, about the pressure of running a company where every decision landed on her shoulders. Somewhere between the main course and dessert, her voice grew quieter. There was a time my company almost went under, she said, tracing the rim of her wine glass. I sat in the office alone until 3 in the morning, trying to save it. I remember thinking if I just worked harder, stayed later, sacrificed more, I could fix everything by myself. I got used to that, carrying it all alone. She looked up at me then, and for the first time I saw the exhaustion she usually hid so well. I don't want to live like that anymore, she said softly. I reached across the table and took her hand. Then don't! After dinner, we walked along the harbor. The wind had picked up, cold and sharp off the water. Claire shivered, and without thinking, I slipped off my jacket and draped it over her shoulders. She started to protest, then stopped when she felt something in the pocket. She reached in and pulled out a small black box. Claire stared at it for a long moment, then slowly opened it. Inside was a simple ring. Nothing flashy, just a clean band with a single small diamond. The kind of ring you choose when you're not trying to impress anyone, only trying to say something real. She looked up at me, eyes wide in a way I'd never seen before. I spent 2 years pretending you didn't matter this much, I said, my voice steady even though my heart was racing. I don't want to keep doing that. I don't want to keep pretending this is just friendship or convenience or anything less than what it actually is. Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. She laughed once, a soft, broken sound, and then the tears started falling. Not dramatic crying, just quiet, real tears that she didn't bother to wipe away. I hate how soft you make me, she whispered. I can live with that. She stood there for a long time, the ring box still open in her hand, the wind tugging at her hair. Then she stepped closer, close enough that I could see every detail of her face in the harbor lights. Okay, she said, her voice barely above the wind. Let's get married. I didn't expect her to say it so simply. No big speech, no dramatic pause. Just those 3 words spoken like the most natural decision in the world. I took the ring from the box and slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly. She looked down at it, then back at me, and for the first time since I'd known her, Claire looked completely unguarded. I'm still going to be difficult sometimes, she warned. I know. And I'm still going to need space when things feel too much. I'll wait. She smiled then. A real smile, the kind that reached her eyes and made something in my chest loosen. You're really doing this, she said. I've been doing this for 2 years, I answered. I'm just finally saying it out loud. We stood there on the edge of the harbor, the city lights reflecting on the dark water. And I realized something I hadn't fully understood until that moment. I wasn't just in love with Claire. I was choosing her. Every version of her, the strong CEO, the tired woman who forgot to eat, the one who had built walls so high even she sometimes forgot what was behind them. I was choosing all of it, and I wasn't afraid anymore. Because for the first time in my life, staying didn't feel like settling, it felt like coming home. We got married the following spring. It was a small wedding, just close friends and family, the kind of people who had actually been present in our lives instead of just passing through. Claire wore a simple white dress that made her look both powerful and soft at the same time. I couldn't stop staring at her, not because she looked beautiful, though she did, but because she looked like she had finally stopped holding her breath. After the wedding, Claire still had days when she pulled away. There were mornings when everything felt too peaceful, and she would start to worry that it was all going to disappear. I could see it in the way she moved around the kitchen, quieter than usual, lost in thoughts she didn't always share. I never pushed her to talk. I just stayed. I made her coffee exactly the way she liked it, strong, no sugar, a splash of oat milk, and left it on her desk before she woke up. I sat beside her on the couch while she read through reports, my laptop open, our legs touching under the blanket. Sometimes I drove out at 11 at night because she had forgotten to eat dinner again. Those small, ordinary things were what built our life together. One evening, about a year after we got married, Claire asked me a question while we were washing dishes. "Why are you always so patient with me?" I rinsed a plate and handed it to her to dry. "Because for the first time in my life," I said, "I met someone who makes staying easier than leaving." She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she set the dish towel down, turned off the water, and wrapped her arms around my waist from behind. Her forehead rested against my back. "I'm still learning how to trust this," she whispered. "I know. I'm not in a rush." And I wasn't. I had waited 2 years to sit down at that restaurant table. I could wait as long as she needed. Years have passed since then. We still live in Chicago, though we bought a small house near the lake instead of staying in my old apartment. Claire's company grew. My design work became steadier, less frantic. We argue sometimes about work, about whose turn it is to take out the trash, about whether pineapple belongs on pizza. It doesn't. But we never go to bed angry. We've learned how to fight without breaking what we built. Every night, I still find myself watching her. She sits on the sofa with her reading glasses on, a stack of documents in her lap, frowning at some ridiculous mistake in a quarterly report. Her hair is usually tied up, a few strands falling loose around her face. She looks exactly like the woman I saw that first night in the restaurant, strong, focused, a little tired, but finally allowing herself to be seen. And every time I look at her, I think about that Friday evening. I think about walking into the restaurant to meet a client and seeing her sitting alone at a table for two. The empty water glass, the untouched bread, the straight line of her back as she waited for someone who wasn't coming back. I think about the 3 seconds I stood there, deciding. Then I think about pulling out the chair and sitting down across from her. That single choice changed everything. Claire once told me that most people leave when things get quiet, when the excitement fades and there's nothing left but ordinary days and small responsibilities. But she was wrong about one thing. The quiet is exactly where I found her. And it's exactly where I chose to stay, every single day since. Every single day.